Hello everybody, my name is Megan, you're watching Miss Megan Knits, and links to the stuff I'm going to talk to you about today are going to be in the description box below. So this would be the time when I would normally release a regularly scheduled podcast where I update you all on my knitting progress, except for the fact that I haven't really done all that much knitting in the past couple of days, so I'm going to put that podcast off until the next time I upload next. What I'm going to do today is that I am going to talk to you about my carpal tunnel syndrome. I have carpal tunnel syndrome. That's why I haven't been knitting. And for me, it kind of comes in waves. So there'll be like months where I don't even remember I have it at all. And then there'll be a couple weeks where my wrists will just not cooperate with me. And they're bad all around when I'm knitting, when I'm using the computer, when I'm trying to open a doorknob. I do have quite a bit of information about my carpal tunnel, but I do want to let you know that I am not a medical health professional in any way, shape, or form. I am not educated on this subject in any formal means. I do not know what the hell I am talking about other than what my doctor has told me and what I have read on the internet. But both of those things are not necessarily 100% reliable. So if you're concerned about yourself, go see an actual doctor or maybe an NP or a PA, some kind of medical professional. This is my experience. I'm not going to purposefully lead you astray. Like, this is what I do. This is my information. It just doesn't have to be your information. And I'll try to leave some links below to places that are more reputable than myself to get you started on the search if you are trying to find more information about it. What is carpal tunnel? Well, the disease we often call carpal tunnel is really carpal tunnel syndrome, because the carpal tunnel is a location on your body, and the carpal tunnel syndrome is when that location has issues. I'm just going to call it carpal tunnel because that's what everybody calls it. The carpal tunnel is a place on your wrist, so you have one on each wrist. And it's like a tunnel. So you have the top of the tunnel are these bones right here. You can feel them, they're bony. And then at the bottom, you have like stretched like a rubber band is this ligament called the transverse carpal ligament. Yes, transverse carpal ligament. And then between them, you have a tunnel. And in the tunnel, you've got some other stuff, some blood vessels, stuff like that. But what we're going to talk about today is the median nerve. So the median nerve goes right through the tunnel. And what happens is, if you have carpal tunnel syndrome, this ligament is squishing that median nerve. And the median nerve gets angry. And it can result in pain. It can result in tingling, numbness, limpness. You can't control things quite as good as you used to be able to. And the symptoms can basically be anywhere from like down here in your arm all the way up through most of your fingers. Your pinky is actually not attached to the median nerve. So that's one of the big giveaways with carpal tunnel syndrome, is that your pinky's fine because your pinky is using another nerve that runs along outside of your wrist. It's completely safe. Despite popular belief, carpal tunnel syndrome is not caused by repetitive motion. Your knitting did not give you carpal tunnel. What happens is it gets aggravated as heck by repetitive motion. So where knitting and typing, for me, those are my big two, did not give me carpal tunnel, my carpal tunnel gets really angry when I do those things and causes symptoms. What does give you carpal tunnel? It's really just the anatomy of your wrist. If your wrist is structured in a certain way, you're more likely to have less room in there. Women are more likely to get it than men, probably because women typically have smaller wrists than men, but men can get it. This is my second plug of the podcast to go see a doctor. If you're having pain that's interrupting your life, making you uncomfortable, causing you any problems, you really should see a doctor. I was really afraid to go see the doctor myself because I was afraid she'd tell me I could never knit again, and I was so freaked out by that. But that's not what she said. She gave me actual tips to make knitting less painful, to help me be more mindful about the ways in which I'm knitting, and that actually cleared up most of my pain. And I'm basically going to talk about home remedies, because that's what I do. My carpal tunnel is manageable with home remedies. If yours is worse, I know steroid injections are a thing. There's actually surgery, and that is something a doctor can help you with. I'm talking about my situation. I've had it for about 3 years. So 3 years ago is when I saw my doctor. My primary care is who I went to. She diagnosed me. That was around the time I was really starting to get into knitting, and I was knitting all the time. And just that much repetitive motion, really, my carpal tunnel was not good. I remember knitting on a shawl, and I was trying to race to get it finished before a deadline. And I'm knitting and I'm knitting and I'm knitting, and halfway through a shawl, they just stopped. They gave out on me. And I was like, okay. I was in pain all the time, and I was still knitting anyway, just making it all worse. I saw the doctor. She did some examinations, she did some poking and prodding, just did some basic stuff, told me what it was, told me the tips I'm about to share with you. These are a combination of tips I learned from her, tips I've found on the internet that I've found that work for me, and tips that I've kind of experimented on my own and found out that work for me. Okay, so some time has passed. My makeup is probably different because the break I took was for therapy and I cried a lot during that session. Usually they're upbeat and cheerful, but this one was not. My first tip, my best tip, rest. It is the most important thing out of all of these things. And whatever other tip you do, you should do it along with resting when you need to. It doesn't have to look like spending like weeks away from your knitting. What you should do is listen to your body and go with what your body needs. When you feel symptoms, and that's what I'm going to call them, but that means anything from numbness to tingling to pain to whatever is going on with you personally right then. When you start to feel symptoms, you should rest. And when you feel well, you should do whatever the heck you want to do. Problem is, if you don't rest and you try to just keep going and keep going and keep going like I did before I was diagnosed, you're going to make things a lot worse. And you're going to eventually need to spend more time resting. Because if you go so far, you aggravate your nerves so much, you have so many bad symptoms, you will need to stop. It will not be an option anymore, right? It'll be so painful you just can't. And at that point, it's going to be you just can't for a while. But if you take kind of frequent breaks and rest whenever you feel like you need to, and wait for things to calm down and then start again, you're going to end up with more knitting time in the long run. Second, coolest tip. It is the coolest tip. It is ice. I told myself I wasn't going to make that joke, but I made that joke. The trick with ice is knowing where to ice, and I think I was going to bring an ice pack up here to show you, and I did not. But the trick is right here. That's where the ice needs to go. It doesn't matter if you're feeling it in your fingers, if you're feeling it in your forearm. For me, a lot of the pain was coming from the top area is where I was feeling the pain. Doesn't matter. Right there. Because this transverse carpal ligament is what's pushing on your nerves, aggravating you. Usually it's because you're doing a lot of motion and it's kind of getting a lot of blood flow and it's swelling up, and then that makes it squish. So if you can calm that down with some ice to kind of reduce that swelling, it'll go right back. Before that, I was trying to surround my wrist with ice, and it's not that complicated. Ice can. I've used a cold can of Coca-Cola if I'm outside at a barbecue knitting. I've stuck it right there. Anything, ice is better, but cool things to that area will help. Okay, this next one, medications. It's really good to use as NSAIDs. Those are good for reducing inflammation, including this inflammation, which will help your pain. However, be smart, use them correctly, use them properly, use them safely. If you are unsure, talk to a doctor. And I will mention that plenty of people, like myself, cannot take NSAIDs due to conflicts with medication they already take. In my case, it's lithium. I can't take NSAIDs and lithium together. Lots of other different kinds of prescription medications can conflict. So if you're not sure, check with a doctor, check with your pharmacist. Pharmacists are undervalued people. They're great. Medications should be used in addition to rest, not instead of rest. Don't just use them to take the pain away so you can keep going, because guess what? You are still aggravating the crap out of your wrists, even if they are not hurting. You want to take it if you need it and rest. My next tip is to talk about braces and splints. This is a brace. This is a splint. They are two completely different things to be used for different purposes, so you don't injure yourself. So what is the difference? Okay, because braces and splints can look a lot of different ways. This is another kind of splint. There are other kinds of braces. But the important thing to know is this. A brace lets you still move. A splint you can't. So a splint generally has harder material. This is metal in here. You cannot move your wrist, or at least I can twist it, but I can't bend it. That's the point, to keep it completely still. They're used a lot also when people break bones or things like that, but keeps it still. A brace still lets you move, but what it's doing is it's squishing my wrist a little bit and giving me a little bit of support and stability and a helping hand in my movement. Braces, again, soft, let you move, squish. These are from Brace Up. Their little branding wore off. I'm going to link them below. I really like them. But there are different kinds of wrist braces. They all work pretty well. But what I like about these is that they're actually a long, like, strip. You put your thumb through here, you wrap it around, and then there's a whole bunch of Velcro. So you can just tighten it and adjust it to whatever feels good to you. I like them personally because I have very small wrists. And so most of the normal brace options where they're just like a sleeve you put on or like a sleeve and a wrap, those just aren't tight enough for me. This way I can get the exact size, the exact position I need. The only downside is that these are a little bit floppy, which can get in the way sometimes. I like to wear braces while I am doing activities that I know will aggravate my carpal tunnel. I do not push through pain. If I'm having like a bad carpal tunnel couple of weeks, and I know I'm going to sit at my computer and type an English essay, then I am going to put these on so I can have longer time before the pain starts. It kind of just extends your wrist's longevity a little bit. I have two types of splints here. I have used both. This one's a little more streamlined, and this one is really thick and padded. This is the one I'm using all the time right now. Not all the time, but you know, when I use splints right now. And this one can be for either hand. So it has two thumb holes. And it's really padded on the inside. So you slip your hand in, and then just, again, a whole bunch of Velcro. There's no movement of my wrist here. Splints, my best use for them is at night, which is why I usually use these, which are padded more. If you were wearing them to do activities during the day, which I wouldn't recommend, but if your doctor told you to wear them during the day, this wouldn't be easier. It's smaller, you have more movement of your hand. So, but why is this important? Well, I'm someone who sleeps like this, with my wrists all crunkled up, and then my head putting weight on them. If I'm sleeping for like 8 hours, crunched up on my wrist, that's a lot of aggravation on that carpal tunnel area that I just don't need to have. Wearing them during the day, pain in the butt. You know, you can't move things, you can't bend your wrist. At night, no big deal, and it actually prevents a lot of the problem. I don't do this all the time. I do this when my carpal tunnel is acting up. So during those, weeks or months when my carpal tunnel is being a pain, I will sleep with these on at night. And I actually know I need to sleep with them on at night because I will wake up with numbness and tingling all through my entire wrist and hand. And I'll be like, oh yeah, probably should start wearing the splints because apparently I'm aggravating my carpal tunnel. I want you to listen to me very closely. Do not knit with a splint on, unless, of course, your doctor says so, because I'm not your doctor. Other than that, everybody else, do not. Right, when you're knitting, there's usually a lot of wrist bending. You can't with a splint on. What happens then? Other joints have to start to move funny to try and keep up with you. So you're going to start to knit, you're going to end up moving your elbow differently, your shoulder differently, your upper back's going to get stiff and weird because you're trying to figure out how to knit without bending your wrist. And then what are you going to have? Elbow problems, shoulder problems, upper back problems. You don't need that. You already have carpal tunnel. You do not need tennis elbow or golfer's elbow or shoulder issues because you're moving all wonky trying to fix it. Just don't. Braces let you bend. So they're okay. Splints, you're going to have to overcompensate with everything else in your body, and it's not worth it. You're going to injure something. We're on to my next tip. Know thyself. I came across this tip when I was looking myself for ways to stop carpal tunnel, and everything always said big needles and super bulky yarn. Here's the deal, folks. It's got to be personal, right? It's got to be different for everybody, because this sounds like a nightmare to me. Okay, these big heavy needles and this chunky yarn. I have a lot of problems knitting with chunky yarn. If you see in my video where I did the time lapse of the Ribbing on the Runway sweater, it was a super bulky sweater, I had my wrist braces on. You know what doesn't cause me problems? Socks. So different types of knitting, or knitting different objects or with different materials, are going to be different on your wrists. You're going to have slightly different movements. Some of them are going to be better than others. I would recommend experimenting with the different types of things you like to do to see if anything's better or worse for you. I actually kept a log of the type of project, how long did I knit, what symptoms am I experiencing. I do best with socks. Small needles, small yarn. For me, it's a smaller motion. instead of a bigger motion with bigger needles that helps me. I do better with flexible needle materials. These are acrylic, these are carbon fiber, both of which have a bend to them, which is very nice on my wrist. Same thing with crochet hooks. I like the plastic ones. They just bend a little bit more, they give a little bit more. That's easier for me than metal or wood. Projects that aren't too heavy on my needles, that are smaller. Again, socks. I do worst with cotton yarn. Cotton is just so stiff. Metal, needles, and hooks is what I do worst with. But again, everyone is different, so you should experiment to see what is better for you, what's worst for you, and make accommodations. For example, I knit a lot of my socks on carbon fiber needles because they give a little bit. It's just easier for me than the metal. And that means I can knit for longer with less pain. I do still knit chunky projects sometimes. I try a lot of the times to use more flexible yarns and needles if I'm doing that. And I try to just know myself and give myself a break if I have to take a break. My next tip, adjust your expectations. You will not be able to knit for as long with as much power and speed and efficiency as someone who does not have carpal tunnel. You can still have a very fulfilling knitting hobby. You can still knit lots of stuff. I still knit lots of stuff. But compared to somebody who does not have the problem, they won't need to take as many rests, you know? So you're just not going to compare. You're not going to match them. It's okay. Something I found pretty harmful for me was that if I'm sitting, I'm knitting mindset. I had knitting projects everywhere. I took them everywhere I go, even for 20 minutes in the car, I'm knitting, right? I wanted to be that. That just wasn't good for my carpal tunnel. I still have great stuff. I mean, I have a knitting YouTube channel. Like, I'm knitting plenty. It's just that it's not all the time. It's not constant like it used to be. Another thing along this line, I don't knit with deadlines. I know some people who will knit everybody something for Christmas. I can't. Having a deadline stresses me out. If I have to knit for Christmas, if I fail, I'm be disappointed in myself, and if I am scared about meeting that deadline, I might ignore wrist pain. I'm sure a lot of you would do the same. If you were really stressed about a deadline, really getting, I'll get to it in a minute, I'll rest later, I'll rest in 15 minutes, right? It's going to encourage you to push your wrist too far. I don't knit with deadlines. I still knit gifts. I knit plenty of gifts. I just knit them and then give them to the person whenever they happen to be finished. Vary your movements. What does this mean? What's good for carpal tunnel is varying it up. Change it up. I do usually have a sock going, but I have other projects also with different yarn, with different needles. I have some crochet going. Sometimes I have loom knit going. I actually picked up loom knitting because my wrist hurt from carpal tunnel and I wanted to see if loom knitting would be easier. And it's not easier, but it's different. So having more different things helps. You can even alternate with a completely different hobby. Do you like making beaded bracelets or scrapbooking? You know, throw those in the mix, cycle it all up, because your wrists are going to be less happy with the same movement over and over and over and over again, and more happy with a little bit of a switching it up, you know. I usually have about 5 projects going that are all completely different from each other, and you know, I switch it up. We're down to the end of the video. We're right to my disclaimer sandwich. I will link places that are probably better sources than me. If they conflict with me, use them because they're better sources than me. I am a human sharing my human experiences. I think that's really valuable to have someone who's going through the same thing kind of tell you what they're doing. Please don't take me as any sort of professional for any sort of good advice. Have I said it enough? Do you understand? Like it if you understand. So that's about it for my video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something. I've been thinking about doing more top videos that aren't podcasts to kind of switch it up a little bit. If anybody wants to see me talk about anything, let me know in the comments below. My name is Megan. This has been Miss Megan Knits, and I will see you in a future video.